Hello, how are you?
Hey, great. So far, it's only people whose first names start with L. So, like the club.
That's funny.
Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to your TESOL conference in May.
Oh,
Which city? Where are you?
wonderful. We're up in North Jersey. It's called Fairlawn Schools.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
yeah, we have a large Russian speaking population with
Okay,
they're our biggest group of ML students. So
okay.
excited to learn as much as possible from you
Oh,
today.
sure. So I'm not going to convert you into a linguist unless you're already one, but I want to give you resources. So that's that's my goal. What do you do in your district?
I'm the supervisor of world languages, multilingual learners, and music.
Oh, and music.
Yeah,
Awesome.
another language.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So you're familiar with the framework. You are a linguist. Ah,
Yes,
great.
yes, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool, cool. I was a little nervous because it's like how to
yeah.
balance,
No,
you
and
know.
New Jersey's a WIDA state, so it also like attracted me to see all that. So yeah,
Yeah, cool. Well, we have things that are free and
yeah.
ways to do this with digital elements. So very cool.
Thank
I'm
you.
just gonna
I'm gonna mute. I'm in Jersey, so I'm gonna mute myself and stop the video only because like now I'm like back at home. So I will. I thank you. I'm excited to learn from you today. Thank you.
That, that sounds great. Thank you. I'm just going to put some links in the chat. And essentially, if you can take a few minutes or take a moment just to say where you're from, um, and let's see. And I'm sorry, I'm looking because I'm apparently also admitting people. Um, so I'm just making sure I don't miss anyone in the beginning. All right, and then I have another screen open here so I can see your responses on where you're from. And so I'm going to begin. And so my name's Lynn Shafer Willner, and I'm one of the WIDA Standards Developers. And I wanted to get something for you today that would give you, I divided this into two parts. So you'd have, the first part would be considerations around selection of activities and AI prompts, and the other just kind of thinking about content language learning templates that you might use, templates that I've been experimenting with when I'm using chat. And then the other part is to break down, there's components of the framework, and we have a digital resource where you can download all this information, and there's a way that you can get out of it free. So the second part, we're going to do a lot of hands-on. So I just wanted to start in the beginning. Though let's start with a quick warm up. And here we go. So if you're not familiar, WIDA is in over 40 states, as well as territories, Bureau of Indian Education, Department of Defense education activity. So we have standards, just to let you know, the resources we'll be sharing can be applied across multiple states. I also did the ELPA 21 standards back in 2014. And even if you're from one of those 8 or 9 states, you can still, there are elements, there's cross lines, and there's conceptual elements that will work for you. Same thing with California. You have your ELD standards of a part 1 and 2. And so there's elements that kind of work with and basic concepts that'll work. So just as warm up in the chat, could you just let me know where you're calling in from, what's your role? And I'm curious, how many students who are identified as English learners do you have in your classroom and or district, depending on which role you use right now? And these students can be called multilingual learners from a very asset-based approach, ESL, ESOL, emergent bilinguals, dual language learners. So our friends to the north in Canada, from whom we have learned a lot, they refer to language learners in that way. So I'm just looking over at the chat over in here. I just haven't iPad going. So where are you calling from? Oh, okay. Hi, you're from Southern California and 5 students. So some of the elements we're going to be talking about today are similar to your part 1 and part 2 with your standards. And California also uses what's called the systemic functional linguistics approach. So, and Liliana's from Fairlawn, great. Christy, you're from Ventura, and Disha, you're from New Jersey. Okay, great. All right, so New Jersey and California. So this is a nice cozy session. So let me just go forward. And so let me ask you, 2 truths and a lie. Which of the following statements is not true? 67% of teachers in the US have a student designated as an English learner in their classroom. High school students who are identified as ELs are 2 times less likely as their non-EL peers to be enrolled in advanced coursework, or on average, it takes 1 to 3 years for students identified as English learners to exit from this status. And yes, we are coast to coast. Which one is not true? Yep, there is one lie. Which one is the lie? Yes, number 1 is true, number 2 is true, and number 3 is not true, because as many of you know, it takes on average 4 to 7 years for students identified as English learners to exit from this status. And for those ELs with intensive learning needs, it can take up to 8 to 10 years. And the important part about this is that we have specialists who work with these students, but all teachers have these students in their classrooms. So there are elements, and the way we design our standards are functioning so that they can work within content area classrooms. So again, here's our elements that we'll be doing. And in the chat, I'll just add one more time. I'll add links that we'll be using today. And as we go forward, here we go to the next part. So with just part 1, and I have to say, I had a quick reminder earlier today when I was in Deirdre Kennedy's breakout session, and it reminded me, when you start, first thing when you're working with the chat bot, remind them or tell the chat that first of all, they need to respond because you are an expert grade 5 teacher of students identified as English learners. So you want chat to take on that role. And she gave it some great phrases to put at the end of your prompt. It's vital to my career. And at the end, asking, do you understand? Here's what I've been finding, though, as I've been working with chat. So you need to prompt the chat bot to include an EL-specific unit features. You need to remind them to embed unit plans in the content area context, and you also to calibrate that content to the actual standards. Otherwise, it just ends up being very generic. And then finally, you want to think about expanding beyond the usual activities. So when we're coming in and just thinking about, like I asked chat, what are the elements of effective unit plan? This is what the reply was. So it's very kind of generic and general. And the big thing that we have in our unit plans, one of the most important parts is to have language development unit goals and lesson objectives. And these need to align both with content standards and ELD standards. So how do you put that in context? So with California, you're aligning with ELA and math. And there are alignments on your state's website that show that. If you have this element in line, all these other specific activities that you might find in a good lesson plan, which you all know, good lesson plan, it's going to stem and align with those unit goals. And why is this happening? It was back in the 80s, we all had separate, and it was very decontextualized, and language teaching was just on this, something separate, colors, numbers, and it started getting more and more integrated. So we had Shimo and doing the work that she was doing, and now there's even more unity. And essentially now in the framework that we work within our country, it's the law. Like our standards by law have to be embedded in the content area standards. So we're kind of like the Ginger Roger of standards, because not only are we dancing with Fred, but we need to do it backwards because we have to align with all of these different content areas. We're not junior English language arts standards. We need to do a lot more. So it's just really looking at how do we find content-based language development opportunities. And so with our standards framework, we've designed it so that it's a nested framework and it has these different elements. I'm going to show you some of these elements, and you'll be able to, even in California, you can kind of think about how you're arranging them, but using these basic guiding questions. And so we have like a basic message that you've got to teach language and content together. And these standard statements started way back before the Common Core movement and everything, back in the early 2000s when states had thousands and thousands of thousands of standards, and they were just all these different elements. And so we'd put out these 5 conceptual statements, but we've gone and we've added more to them so that you can get the specifics of the language demands. So a basic template that you might have, and you can find it in one of the articles I linked in your chat, is that you're going to say in your content area, when you're learning and whatever your content standards are, then you would go and focus on, and you can build it down into a broad family of language called a key language use, and then your language expectations. And that would be in California, that's your part 1. So the big thing I found is that AI, again, it's so generic, it doesn't do it. So if I put in a prompt like this, just talking about students identified as English learners, if I'm lucky, I'll get something. Sometimes I was talking to someone in North Carolina the other day, they had to put in who don't speak English as their first language. So there's a lot of training that still needs to go on. So the thing that I found is I've said, the unit should correspond, and then before creating the unit, ask me for the language expectations, and then I can provide them. So this is really important because it lets you know which language development, like which opportunities you want to identify. And when you're putting this in your prompt, we have in WIDA, and with California too, you have at the beginning this kind of what's called a human reference code, or this reference code. And our standards were hardwired from the beginning to work with AI. So you're going to have, it has the content area, the grade level cluster, key language use, and even the mode of communication. And then we have these bulleted statements that are language functions. So this is what you're going to add. You're going to prompt AI, and then you can add your standards in there. And just to take a minute to say, how is language development, it's not junior English language arts, but how does it compare to content instruction? So I have right here, this is from our standards document. It's an annotated text, but it's kind of like, it's got a juicy sentence in it. And so a lot of work that you do will be deconstructing these texts with kids. And you can see in this, you're not solving for the content. With language development, you're actually helping kids think about how language works in the service of learning. So they could be working on declarative statements, cohesion, causal connectors, how to expand density with prepositional phrases. Like you'll notice a lot of these things in yellow. These are the nuts and bolts of what we call language expectations and their features, or in California, it's in your part 2. So this is like what you're helping kids master. Here's another example. So this is a content objective using Georgia standards. And basically, they have in social studies, they had this text, and they were looking at, can you explain the importance of Gutenberg and the invention of the printing press? So that's what the student is looking for, in that highlighted text. But from a language development perspective, like I'm in grades 9, 12, and around for cohesion of language at the end of proficiency level 4, I might be looking at what's called given and new ideas. And these are connections within text, like a theme ream. And basically, it's the same text. But if you look within a well-developed text, you'll see number 1 has given in the 50 years after Gutenberg began printing, and then new, given, new, given, new. And that's how paragraphs get structured. So you can help kids with language development as they're working and expanding their repertoire for that content area. So as we're going, the other part is there's some basic questions that you might be asking. And with most standards that work in the US, they look at 3 dimensions: discourse, sentence, and word phrase. And these are common questions that you might use with this, and it will be in the PDF. So if you want to use them for the guiding questions, but we've gone and we've broken it further down into the 5 criteria of language that are the most high leverage, that really help you as you're thinking about these basic dimensions of language use. So again, these questions will all be associated with that, but these are things that when you're doing chat, it's thinking about how you're going to build out even a lesson objective template from there, and looking at how with, you know, you're doing something with a language function, part one of California, and then you're going to be learning, breaking down and deconstructing and then co-constructing the language features or the PLDs. And that's part two in California. So the big thing I've found is, like, when you have your prompt and you're going, you have your basics, you've asked it to ask you, you've asked the, you know, to ask me for the standards. You can also include activities. And, you know, there's that you can say, okay, well, I'm going to include these basic techniques. I was surprised that chat the other day, it did know what SIOP was. It did know these basic elements. But as I was thinking about it, and I just want to pose this to you, and I would quickly check with the chat, but pose this to you that essentially there's a lot of different types of activities to be doing this. And I just want to put this out for food for thought, because we can do just basic unit plans and keeping it close to what we're already doing. Sentence frames, starters, these are all good translation tools, but it's about what 60% of the kids are born in the US, and they're young kids. So how much language development instruction have they had in their home language? Hopefully they have, but if they haven't, there's the limitation with relying just on translation tools. Going there from looking at augmentation, so activities where you're kind of taking something, but you're adding the digital feature to it, taking your activity. There's some nice ideas. One that I found is really interesting is looking at how you can adapt the complexity. Here's the text. Can you make it simple? Or you could take it with the PLDs. Can you make it aligned with these, this level? And then finally, and also modification, then you start getting into a lot more that's going on. And I've been seeing in the coming years, a lot with with the new, I was listening to an interview from someone from Google, and they were saying in about two or 3 years, things are really going to open up in this area. So I can't imagine, how we're going to be changing what we're doing for different activities. And finally, obviously, just all these different ways, adapting and authentic audiences, problems, natural language processing for feedback. So we're actually exploring different ways that we could do this in a way to support and build out more tools. So WIDA's actively looking at this as well. The other thing I was thinking about is, how do we go and have a chat to go and look at low floor, high ceiling tasks? So how do we include these types of categories in our prompts as we're using chat? Okay, so again, we're looking at these basic elements as we're going through this, and we want to expand, calibrate, and embed with this. So for the second part of the presentation, I'd like to look at beyond the ask me, like, or when you have you've asked them to ask, sorry, you've asked chat to ask you where you can get these digital parts. For years, we've been stuck in PDFs. And so it's time to move beyond PDFs and looking at much more digitized types of text. So the research shows that if you create something that's aligned with state identified learning priorities, it's a high quality, that leads to higher quality digital resources, and you get more cohesive, developmentally appropriate instruction and assessment. So that content and focus will work there. And so one of the reviews that I did was look at every single state's standards and looking at, and in addition, and then narrowing it to the WIDA standards, and then looking at those language demands and seeing that. So we're going to give you a framework, which is why WIDA is a framework, so that it can work across many different states. So again, the problem is the typical AI generated unit, it just, proposes vocabulary. So can we do more? It does not identify the grade appropriate language to be targeted. And that's where the digital part, this digital element, the second part of the prompt, you can get that from this resource. So again, as a reminder, you have your language expectation and it's broken down in the codes. And then you have different language expectations. And for WIDA, what we do is we believe that you should have everyday language and academic language should be mixed. So we don't have our everyday language standard 1. That's not just before, you don't learn it just before the the academic language. You learn it before, during, and after. It's all part of it. It's all interwoven. Because there's times as you're grappling with an idea, you're going to use that everyday language to make sense of it. So we typically pair and we pull from partnered language expectations, but a lot of it is that you have options. You can mix, you can match as you're going here. So the big part for using AI effectively is how to make your target data set smaller. And one of the ways we found to do this is what's called the key language uses. And these are broad genre families. They look a lot like text types, but they're different. They're organized by social purpose for language use. And so you're finding with narrate, you're looking at real, events that are happening in form. You're looking at how language unfolds in space. Explain, you're looking at how ideas are connected to make an account of how things work or why. And for argue, you're developing claims and comparing, you're providing evidence, but you're comparing perspectives. So these are all broad families of language use. And if you can think about, if you make one of 4 choices, then you can go and quickly find that choice in your language expectation. And I just wanted to give you some examples of in grade 6-8, what narrate might look, the broad family around narrate, inform, you're identifying, describing, classifying, explain. If it's a chart, it's probably explanation because it's all these connections again. And then argue, it's justifying and evaluating perspectives. So one of the things we have is we don't do all the key language uses in each content area. It's too much. There's no way you can reach it all, but we do divide by 4. And so we've identified the most prominent. And in doing that, what I would like to do is take you over to a scavenger hunt. And we're going to look through a platform, and this platform has all state standards on it. And essentially, you're going to be able to look through this. So as you pull this up, actually, what I'll do is let me run you to the first part. And so the initial part of our Explorer, it's at standards.wida.us. Essentially, you come into this page and you're on a platform called Standard Satchel. And essentially, we wanted to have standards where content teachers could go in and look at them from the content perspective. And then they could also go and divide those and then get into the language expectations. And then we have our tiles. And this identifies for that grade level cluster what you would find, what you would need for that student. The other part is we have language expectations that are done by the key language use. So it's the same language expectation, but mirrored in 2 places. And then we also have our proficiency level descriptors that are in here. So what I want to do is ask you, can you go and locate this standard? It would be, I'm going to just take it off. It's the social studies language expectation for grades 2-3, key language use of argue, and it's in the interpretive mode. So it was grades 2-3, social studies. So I might start here. So it's social studies, grades 2-3, and then I might look for argue, and was it interpretive? And in the language expectations, we're basically showing, the bolding shows what changes as the level increases. So it gives you a progression flow. So in New Jersey, you all used to be in Park. Actually, this idea came from where Park had their progressions in the model content framework. So can you find that? Okay. And one thing I want to show you one part in here, this platform, and again, the California content standards are there, but if you all know, they would love to put the California ELD standards up as well. But you can take this and use the copy feature. You can copy it, you can drag and drop, and you can copy it. But if you have your chat prompt, you can just pop these in. I found they're really rich, so at times you may need to trim it back and get your data set just a little smaller. Okay, and then the next one. So there's a pinning feature where you can pair the language expectations. So say you have this one up, there's a pin right here, and then I want to pin it. I might go to get grades 2, 3, and I might pin grades 2, 3 argue and pin those two standards together. And then I can look at them and I can pull from them. Another element that you could do is you can relate your proficiency level descriptors and your language expectations. This is a big deal for helping you to be able to pull elements together. So say I'm going to unpin this, and then I wanted to look at these elements. I have the language expectation, and oops, you know what, I'll do it easier just for the purposes of showing. It's a little easier just to show one single example. Here's narrate with interpretive. You can tie this together with the proficiency level descriptors. The other thing you can do, and you can pull from your language, is you can grab a table and I made a table, an HTML table, where you can get all the charts. It takes out the examples and you can see what changes. So I usually I take this and I can drag this into a Word document and copy paste from there. And so this, to be able to find that document again, you're clicking on the expressive or interpretive mode. If you want to go and print, you can just, there's a print feature that you have. And so say I want to get this printed, I would take this element and say I go down a little further. Oops, I see where I want to do it. So say I want to print, you can go and add this element, and you can choose to print this item only or its descendants. And then you have all these choices. If I include the GUID, these standards are lined up so they're machine readable. And then we have the content creators, they're also adding this in. And we have districts who are actually adding this into their learning management system. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The other part is, I want to show you, you can go with this platform, you have trees, you have tiles. So I could go and look at going with the tiles. I can look at the progression across. So there's a lot of different layouts. There's also a table layout. And this is where you can go and export the standards framework. So say I want to export the items, you show the filters, select the areas, export as a spreadsheet, or you can export by the internal relationships. So we're moving into a phase now where you have all these different versions of standards and they're digitized and you can find all these relationships. We are way beyond the PDF right now. The last part I want to show you is when you're looking at this type of platform, you can go and you can ask for, you can use the AI tool. And so say I want to look at, I'm just going to look at cohesion. I can put this element in, but you can hit the little robot and it will actually give you a tighter search. So we have a simple AI search. So you have the downloading, and so you all can, I'll let you play with this a little more, but then the question is, so why is it useful? And you feel free to play more, and I will just give more about why is this useful to the work that you're doing. And let's go. These standards, and there's standards from across the country, they're open and free to all educators and public institutions. So one of the things to talk to your IT director about is that you can join what's called the Case 2 network, and you can join as like districts, public and state agencies, districts, schools. You can join this network, and from there you get free versions both of human readable, but also the 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 human codes and free readable. So we have, let's say they have in a basic part, they already have the California standards up there. So you can go up and you could pull in to, here's the interface with the California standards. And just what I was showing you with the tour, your elements are in there. You could go into your standards and you could copy and paste. So you don't have to be pulling from the document, from the PDF. There's a different way to do this. And one of the cool things about this network is that because it's a big difference from how standards used to be organized. Basically three or so companies kind of they were creating all the machine readable versions. They were telling the standards issuers how those standards should be organized. There was a time I was looking, I was like, this is not how our language development standards are organized and how you do this. So with this framework, it's a free network where you can go, the standards agency can go and publish their standards there, and then the educators can get it for free. And the way they pay for it is there's tech suppliers who also use the same codes, and they pay just enough to be able to keep the lights on and pay for platform basic maintenance costs. So the big part is we're trying to move beyond just having a few companies kind of control what's going on, and have it where the educators can keep that open access to standards. Things aren't behind a paywall, a subscription. You can be able to get free versions to put in your lessons. The other part that we have is we have like alignments between these standards, and I pulled them up ahead of time. And essentially every state's got to go and create, over the next 4 years, every state has to go and create alignments between their language standards and their content standards. And so right now, Georgia's already done it, North Dakota, North Carolina, different states are still in the process of doing this, and they're going to do this and turn in this mapping. But if you take this mapping, then a content teacher can go and say, well, I'm doing this activity here in NGSS, and I'm wondering possibly which language standards might it relate to. So every single state has to do this to show the connections that are there. You know, they're meeting the law between content and language standards. And the idea is to have a back mapping so that if a content educator goes and looks up their content standard, then these language standard suggestions will come up. And again, we're not telling you that you have to use these language standards. These are options, these suggestions that we're showing, but they're options so that then you can go and start to make it easier to plan the different elements. So part of the review, just to give you some background, when we went and did this review and looking at the different elements that were in there. So, you know, for example, in the Common Core, there are these different strands that are available. We went and looked through, and with our framework, you can see, you know, within WIDA, the majority of states do use a closed version of the Common Core, but there are 8 WIDA consortium members who've actually modified it and made additions, and we have 6 more who are not. So we've been able to do a mapping that fits across all these different states. The big part that I love about this is, again, it's time to move beyond the PDF and time to get into where you can download it on your phone. So this platform, it's easy to get it on your phone. I'll use it to go in and grab different things. You can download it again, and you can search it much easily. You can also go and track any revisions, so you can always find the most recent version on this, and it's free. So and then here we have the GUIDs, the machine readable codes. And just to show you, this is going to be happening in different types of states. And I'm just going to show you some examples, because you have, in the next 2 or 3 years, you have, so states are going and they're converting their standards into case. And then the school districts are loading that into their learning management systems. They call them ed tech suppliers, but it's like the content creators, like Newsella, different companies, they're using the standards and they're all posted here on the Case2 network and in this platform. And basically, everything should be able to pull together, and you should be able to have your unit, and then using the reference codes, you can find the different product, different resources that you'll need. So, and I'm hoping actually we'll be doing some webinars on this with WIDA where you can bring your IT person with you, because right now Chicago, for example, is doing really interesting work. In Georgia, Henry County is doing some very interesting work, and they're just creating these really neat interfaces where you can find, basically, here's the model. You search for one content standard and the language standards come up. So your content, how content folks are saying, I'm not sure, I don't understand this, it's very technical. This way they can start looking at this. And once they look at, they're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense for a language expectation that I need to meet at that grade level cluster. But it seems a little overwhelming. So if we can have a way to make it, one click and you can find this, I think that would be a great improvement. Here's, if you're in Georgia, they have something called Georgia Connects, and it's all in the back end. It's all hardwired with this. So hopefully with AI and you're plugging into that, you're going to be able to find things much more easily. Here's an example of what Newsella is doing. And so this is a lesson they had aligned it with NGSS middle school. And this was looking at evidence from rock strata, so earth science. And here's how and then Newsella is taking this and aligning it to the WIDA language expectation. And then from there, they can go into the proficiency level descriptors. So you kind of have, if you think about language standards, you have your what, which is the language expectation, and then how the student is doing it, like measuring the progress, that's with your proficiency level descriptors. And then with California, you have 3, in, out, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's a lot of different types of platforms. And I guess from here, I just wanted to let you know, so this exists, it's free. And when you're doing AI, there's so many different possibilities, but you don't have to go and spend all this time converting the resources. We hope that we can make these digital versions make it easier for you to do these different activities. So I can give you some time back, or I'm happy to, if you want to use your mic, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, I'll just put this one more time in there with the resource. Oops, I had copied it. Well, here's the language expectation, but I will also copy if you arrived late, so you can get these links. But if you have questions or you want help talking to your tech people or different elements, yeah, let me know. Happy to help.
Hi, it's Christy. Where
Yeah.
can I find that chart on the bottom left-hand side of your screen right now?
Absolutely. So if you look in the chat, there's a link that says casenetwork2.oneedtech.org. So I'm going to click on it.
I see it.
And where are you, Christy? Just can you remind me?
Southern California.
Okay, so you have here, it would be awesome to get your ELD standards up there. But for the meantime, you can go in there and you can download your standards. And
Yeah.
here, let's make it
Okay,
larger.
I see it. That's very interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And then WIDA, for example, we're down below, and let me show you for the WIDA folks, New Jersey, like you can go do a back map since you're in New Jersey, and a lot of your standards are close to the, standards used in multiple states. When you load the WIDA standards, hit the back button, oops, or if I go into, go into like, let's just say, I'll do the Common Core. So we'll do Common Core and then ELA. You can go into the Common Core and you can already see the connections that are in there. So this is the work from the development work. It's not the final mapping. New Jersey's still going to run that for their own evidence. But if you need a starter part, or you can go into the case network there, and it has a mapping already to this is for development. And when we were building out the language expectations, we had to go and show all these mappings in the back end. You were asking, is there a date New Jersey will have that complete? They are putting that together, but I do not have the date on that. So yeah, I'm just not sure. So I've told them I'm available anytime to finish it up. It's just a matter of technical assistance. But the other part is to let them know if, do you want, not every state's doing it digitally. Let them know if they want to have some type of digital platform for this, and let the NJDOE know. Okay, you'll wait for May. Oh, that'd be nice. You'll see. Yeah, I'll definitely be there. We'll be doing a lot of different sessions. So yeah, come say hi to me. So this is the session. Basically, there's different prompts, and that's how we train AI to just remember to use grade appropriate content. Christy, let me ask you one question. What do you what in your district, what's your role again?
So I am a teacher on special assignment over technology and testing. But we have close to 50% of our student population are English language learners. And just like your stats at the beginning, with your 2 truths and a lie showed, it takes many, many years for our students to ever, it's what we call reclassify, to move into, they're out of the English language development programs. So I work with those teachers and all teachers on trying to develop interesting content. It's, say, for our middle schoolers, instead of getting an elective class where they could go and do art or band or something, their elective is their English language development. And so we're trying to find ways to make that more of a fun elective, so they can be involved in art, but they're still developing language. It's been a little bit of a hard pedagogical switch for many of our ELD teachers. They're just kind of hung up on, I just have to teach the language, and they just kind of use a drill and kill kind of a strategy. So yeah, so I'm just always looking for something that I can give them that would help them, specifically our ELD teachers, help them develop some kind of content that's teaching language, but in more of an enjoyable way, I guess, something that's more fun.
Because I was looking at a lot of parts, looking at, let me go up to the SAMR part, because I find you could do the same old, and it's just like, kids, do they want to go to school? No, it's just, sitting in a chair all day long. And so how do you get an activity? I just want to hear an activity where they could even if they could ask they could take a text and they could strip out go to part 2 in California. What if you strip out all the adverbs, you strip out all the noun groups, or you adjust the noun groups, but they could do that type of activity. That would be pretty fun, where they're not saying, oh, chat, this is something that it's going to be plagiarism. They're actually using it as a tool to look at how language is working.
One thing we've had a little bit of success with is using, I use Adobe Firefly, which is a generative AI picture program. So it's called text to image, and they type in text and then it creates an image. But the really cool thing in addition to that it does is as they edit their prompt, the pictures change. And so we have them start with something
Wow.
simple like setting for a book, and they'll go a dark and stormy night. And then we have them start adding in adjectives and other modifiers. So, a dark and stormy night in winter, a dark and stormy night in winter in the forest, and then it starts changing those pictures, so they really start to understand how descriptive language enriches their writing. And so that's been a fun little activity that we've done with them.
That's super clever.
Yeah.
That's,
yeah.
And it's, so part of it is like the setup, and like, how do you get the activity that really ties into the element that's going to give you the most for what you need.
Yeah, exactly.
So tricky.
Then we've reversed it to where we give them a picture that's been generated in AI, and they have all the blanks kind of like a Mad Lib. So there's adjective, noun, verb, prepositional phrase, like, so can you fill that in and create the same picture, which is fun. Anyway, enough about what we're doing. Can we get a copy of these slides? Because I didn't see that in your links and it was going kind of fast. I'd like to go back to some of this and dig into it a little bit more deeply.
Absolutely. So they let us know, just send them, we're going to send them over by Friday. So I will send them over. I'll just make a PDF of it.
Perfect.
And you're welcome. And you also, if you don't see it, you have my email. Happy to help. But yeah, California has it's really neat. And it would be so awesome if in the back end, say we have a central content standard. And what if if WIDA standards connect to it in California, then wouldn't it be neat that we could share resources across all these states, even if, no matter what the membership is? Like, that would be really amazing. So that's the next thing to do. So definitely I will post that, and I'm happy if any follow-up, just let me know. Well, and that's it. I'm going to give you back some time. So enjoy. Thank you so much.